We miss Barack Obama.
Juan does.
There he is. In a recent speech, he said he had no real scandals in his White House, a jab at Trump.
We didn't have a scandal that embarrassed us. I know that seems like a low bar. Generally speaking, you didn't hear about a lot of drama inside our White House.
No drama. So to quote the TSA officer whose dog just sniffed my carry-on, let's unpack this. So why didn't you hear much about O's White House? Well, who was brave enough to look? There was never a cozier relationship between a president and the media, ever. If the White House were a bed, the press was the mutt dozing at the foot of it. Thank God Obama didn't eat it. Classic. So the media voluntarily took an 8-year sleeping pill with his liver snap, only to wake up when Obama's policies led to the rejection of his party and the election of Trump. They're no longer Obama-tos. They sprung to action. And it wasn't like there were no scandals under Obama. DOJ, IRS, Benghazi. The media's bar was so high in terms of interest, however, they didn't exist. So now you have a woke press chasing down any incident where Trump has a burger whose center is in hot pink. Now, the funny part is Obama's speech was at a conference where participants were ejected if they shared any part of it. So, you want to know why you never heard about Obama? There's your answer. Compliance. Compare that to Trump's White House, the most transparent entity since the invention of Scotch tape. And still the press scrambles after him as if they're making up for lost time. It's like watching a fat man climb a mountain after a lifetime of couch surfing and pizza. No wonder they want a Democrat in 2020. They could use the rest. Isn't it true, Dana, that Obama's lack of scandals were not about scandals, but a compliant press that allowed him to operate in total secrecy?
Well, having been a Republican press secretary, I would say, yes, Republican communicators always have to work harder.
Yes, that is true.
But I also think one of the things Obama said is there were no scandals that embarrassed us. If you're not capable of embarrassment, then that would be true.
Ooh,
the other thing is that it is true that there is less drama.
Greg Gutfeld touches on various scandals involving different political figures, comparing their severity. Juan argues that the Mueller investigation, which led to multiple indictments and guilty pleas, is a major issue. Jesse and Kimberly push back, pointing out that other controversies, like the Rob Porter scandal and Obama's ties to Reverend Wright, were also significant. The discussion highlights the different standards of scrutiny applied to political figures and the importance of investigating serious allegations like those in the Mueller probe.
The goal, limit the damage to a small area in order to prevent a larger inferno that would engulf the entire candidacy. For it to work, the conditions had to be right. You had to pick the right host, the setting, the length of time, the chaperone, and the questions. And the obvious one to avoid was her role in covering Joe's mental unfitness. Remember, she insisted President Biden was extraordinarily strong.
You insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart.
So smart. So smart he had to drop out of the race. But what if she's telling the truth that to her, Joe seems smart? That would mean she's a drooling idiot. And Bash just shrugs. But if she did anything else, she'd make Kamala look bad, and we know that that helps Trump. And what do you do when asked about the obvious coup against Biden? You do what any seasoned hack does. Turn it into a family moment. Did it happen on a Sunday?
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces, and we had just had pancakes and, you know, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes."
Greg Gutfeld mocks Kamala Harris by comparing her poorly to Obama, pointing out that while Obama might have been a smooth-talking manipulator, at least he could string a sentence together. He highlights how Harris stumbles through interviews, gives confusing answers, and constantly flip-flops on issues like fracking. Gutfeld sarcastically suggests that Harris is trying to ride Obama's coattails, but ends up looking like a parody.
President Obama's farewell speech soared, towered, dragged. True, it was longer than Reagan's, Clinton's, and GWB's speeches combined. If it got any longer, it would have qualified as a third term. I hope he doesn't ask for anything.
I do have one final ask of you as your president. The same thing I asked when you took a chance on me 8 years ago. I'm asking you to believe, not in my ability to bring about change, but in yours. Yes, we can. Yes, we did. Yes, we can.
Oh, God.
It was a moving speech, and the audience response equally moving. So if the Obama presidency were a film, this speech would be the climax. All that's missing is the horse, the sunset, the rousing closing music as the title card reads "The End," perhaps in cursive. It was, in short, meaningful for millions, but not for me, because I'm a jerk.
Yep.
And I've gotten used to such theatrics, and I'm cynical about the waves of impassioned sentiment. Part of this skepticism is due to the wide gap between how a person talks one-on-one and how they speak before a crowd. Compare the two and you realize how the latter relies on manipulation. Soaring rhetoric lets you forget about the gaps in truth. But these days, I want words to matter more than emotion, which may be why Trump is either seen as refreshingly real or coarse and rough. He's the Obama opposite. When he speaks before crowds, it's pretty much how he talks. Blunt, raw, messy, but louder. Let's compare this.
I leave this stage tonight even more optimistic about this country than when we started. Because I know our work has not only helped so many Americans, it has inspired so many Americans.
To this.
Go ahead.
Sir,
Quiet.
can you state,
Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
Can you state
She's asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a
Don't
question?
be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can
No,
you
I'm
give
not
us
going to
a
give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
So, yeah, the next 4 years, definitely going to be different. You might not get a thrill up your leg, but haven't we had enough of that already?
Greg Gutfeld reflected on President Obama's farewell speech, noting how it was emotionally powerful and resonated with many people. However, Gutfeld expressed skepticism, feeling that the speech, while moving, relied heavily on rhetoric and emotional appeal rather than substantive truth. He compared Obama's polished theatrical style to Trump's blunt, rough, and unfiltered approach. According to Gutfeld, while Obama's speeches are designed to inspire, they can sometimes feel manipulative, whereas Trump's straightforward manner, though messy, is seen as more genuine. He concludes that the next 4 years under Trump will be very different, lacking the emotional appeal that characterized Obama's presidency.
Is Obama gay, needing attention over an old letter? What? I should read that again. Anyway, no, we'll just keep going. The New York Post obtained a redacted portion of a handwritten letter the former president sent to his then-college girlfriend, Alex McNear. Alex, eh? Back in 1982. He talked about his, quote, androgynous mind and wrote, and I'm quoting Obama here, "I make love to men daily, but in the imagination." Kat, this is fantasizing... Is fantasizing about having sex with men gay?
Well, as an expert in man-on-man gay sex,
That's why I asked you.
I think it's so horrible that somebody released this.
Yeah, I know.
Stuff that you say when you're 21 people are going to be like, what did you mean when you were 21? He's 21, saying stuff in a letter.
How do they get these?
Exactly. I'm like sitting here sweating, thinking about everyone I ever sent a text message to when I was 21.
Don't make me sympathize with Obama.
Oh, I that's easy to do in this situation.
Yeah, what, Tyrus? Well,
my blackness won't allow me to comment on this. Listen, I can only assume he really wanted to get out of the relationship really bad.
Yeah.
And I can relate because I was in a relationship to where every time I tried to leave the right way, it was not going to happen.
So you just said I'm gay.
So I couldn't. But the problem was I'm not as civilized as I am now. I had different theories of that lifestyle back then. I was gonna say it so she would leave, and I was like, I'm just gonna try to work this out a little longer. I couldn't say it, so it had to be really bad.
Yeah.
For him to say that, because if he says that.
Greg Gutfeld and his co-hosts on The Five were discussing a resurfaced letter from Obama in which he mentioned fantasizing about men. The conversation quickly turned into a humorous and sarcastic exchange. They joked about the implications of the letter, with Kat commenting on the absurdity of judging someone based on what they wrote when they were young. Tyrus and Kennedy added their takes, making light of the situation by imagining how it might have affected Obama's relationships.
In an act of wonderfully skewed priorities, President Obama will appear in a reality TV show in which he gets survival tips from Bear Grylls in Alaska. Funny how far that is from the streets of Chicago, outposts in need of real survival training, much like the streets of Baltimore, Milwaukee, New York, New Orleans, where citizens are ventilated daily. As Obama grins in insulated comfort, somewhere another bystander bites the dust. So as Putin slices apart the Arctic, our guy renames a mountain from McKinley to Denali. Who knew Obama was a fan of trucks used to drop pop stars off at rehab? This is all window dressing for his bigger shtick, his apocalyptic climate change kabuki featuring a nightmarish endgame of road warrior ruin, unless, of course, you heed his warning.
Those who want to ignore the science, they are increasingly alone. They're on their own shrinking island. If we do nothing to keep glaciers from melting faster and oceans from rising faster and forests from burning faster and storms from growing stronger, we will condemn our children to a planet beyond their capacity to repair. Submerged countries, abandoned cities, fields no longer growing, indigenous peoples who can't carry out traditions that stretch back millennia.
Well, that doesn't sound so bad. It's the same strategy used with Iran. Agree with the Great One, or you will cause nuclear war. Denali sounds like denial, as Obama turns his back on big city murder rates. Remember, he was going to stop the rising tides. But what of this ocean of red? Milwaukee's murder rate jumps 76%. That's 45 extra bodies. St. Louis murder rate jumps 60%. That's 41 extra bodies. Baltimore jumps 56%, 77 bodies. D.C., 40% leap, that's 32 extra bodies. Chicago, a 20% jump, 50 bodies. And New York, a 9% increase, gives you 18 extra bodies. So in 8 months, that's hundreds of extra bodies, many of them black. It's quite a mountain, Mr. President. What shall we name it?
Greg Gutfeld criticized President Obama for prioritizing a reality TV appearance with Bear Grylls in Alaska over addressing rising murder rates in major U.S. cities like Chicago and Baltimore. He sarcastically noted that while Obama focused on climate change and renaming a mountain, violence and homicides were surging, with hundreds of additional deaths, many of them black. Gutfeld argued that the president's attention should be on the alarming murder rates and the recent killings of police officers, rather than what he views as less urgent issues like climate change.
That wasn't my fault, Donald Trump. He's still talking, by the way. Happy Thursday, everyone. So earlier tonight, Kamala Harris officially accepted her party's nomination for president. God, I hope Joe doesn't find out about this. You know, I tell you what she said, but we're still having it translated. She arrived at the arena just as you'd expect. In fact, here's a shot of her limo.
Nice.
Her husband, Doug Emhoff, was in such a celebratory mood, he knocked up 2 nannies. 2! Tim Waltz's former high school football players introduced him on Wednesday, but people on social media pointed out that Waltz only served as an assistant coach, mostly assisting them with their tampons. Donald Trump vows to impose tough new sentences on illegal migrant criminals, including the death penalty. In other words, he's sending them to Chicago. Kamala Harris' support for a bail fund continues to haunt her as more examples of crimes committed by those released come to light. The Minnesota Freedom Fund paid bail for an assailant who killed someone a week later, a habitual DUI driver who later crashed and killed a passenger, and a serial arsonist who tried to burn down a mosque. So it's a murderer, a drunk driver, and an arsonist, otherwise known as the Democrats' base. That was a long walk. Last night, on her walk to the podium, a sheet of paper fell from Nancy Pelosi's pantsuit. It actually turned out to be the warranty card for her face. Terrible! How dare you laugh at that? Meanwhile, in her ancestral Indian village, people are cheering for Kamala Harris's presidential bid. A woman claiming to be the village mayor wished her good luck. Wrong Indian! Wrong Indian!
Greg Gutfeld humorously criticizes the Democratic National Convention, mocking Kamala Harris and her supporters. He sarcastically compares the event to a fantasy world where the Democrats pretend Trump is still president and Kamala has no responsibility for current issues. He jabs at the DNC's attempt to portray Harris as a strong leader, likening her to a plumber who clogs toilets. Gutfeld also mocks their promises to fix problems they created and ridicules their attempt to rekindle patriotism, contrasting it with their past actions.
Even if they run Michelle. According to a new poll, Michelle Obama isn't as strong a Democratic candidate against former President Donald Trump as many Dems would have you believe. In a hypothetical matchup, my favorite kind, Trump wins with 47% of the vote compared to Michelle Obama's 44%. I guess some of the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote. Remember that? And what have we here? Is it independent candidate RFK Jr. making the argument that President Biden is the much worse threat to democracy?
I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Democrats are also luring up to keep RFK off the ballot in multiple states.
Greg is talking about how Democrats aren't as strong as they seem, especially when compared to candidates like Michelle Obama. He also jokes about Biden being out of touch, signing anything he's told, and mentions RFK Jr. criticizing Biden as a bigger threat to democracy. The group discusses how Biden is losing support from young voters and minorities, and there's some humor about Michelle Obama potentially running but facing humiliation if she lost to Trump.